I want to briefly touch on Frank Vogel and the Phoenix Suns. In order for the Phoenix Suns to win a championship, with Kevin Durant on their roster, obviously you still have Devin Booker, Bradley Beal was a big time trade that was made. I do believe this is probably going to be the Suns, kind of core big three roster for at least the next 2 to 3 years because the salary cap for Phoenix, it's not really that flexible because of the fact that they made the investment to trade for a guy like Bradley Beal. I could be wrong, but in terms of what the Suns have as far as their roster goes, I mean, obviously you can make a move or two here or there, and who knows? The salary cap goes up every single year. But I think for the most part, outside of a couple of minor tweaks and changes that Phoenix might try to make, potentially if they don't win a championship sometime here soon, this is the core roster the Suns are kind of stuck with unless they want to potentially rebuild. Now, do I think the Suns need to rebuild? Absolutely not. I do believe you need to kind of stick it out and ride it out with Kevin Durant, with potentially a Devin Booker and a Bradley Beal. So that's my takeaway on that. But I want to zero in on Frank Vogel once again. If the Phoenix Suns want to win a championship, Frank Vogel needs to step it up. Now, I like Frank Vogel. I actually was behind the Phoenix Suns hiring Frank Vogel. Now, I preferred Nick Nurse over a guy like Frank Vogel because I think Nick Nurse is a better head coach than a guy like Frank Vogel. But Frank Vogel's good. He's proven to be a good head coach. He was really good for years in Indiana. He was a solid head coach at times for the Magic. And he won a championship being the head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. But in terms of that championship win, you always have to wonder with a LeBron James-led team, how much is the coach, really putting into this roster? How much time is he really putting in? Because LeBron James can kind of be an extension of the coaching staff because of LeBron James's basketball IQ. I mean, seriously, I think LeBron, I'm not trying to glaze the guy, but LeBron is in the conversation for smartest basketball player to ever live. LeBron knows more about basketball than probably at least 70 to 80% of NBA head coaches right now. That's how smart of a basketball player LeBron James is. So you had that guy not only being a great player, but also kind of being a great leader, facilitator / head coach on and off the court. So you have to kind of bake that in. How much work was Frank Vogel really doing in terms of coaching up that Los Angeles Lakers team that won a championship? But again, I believe in Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel is a good defensive head coach. I think that players respect and relate to the guy. But in Phoenix, there seems to kind of be a disconnect for some reason, and the level of consistency has not quite been there with Frank Vogel leading the charge. I understand there's been injuries. I understand that there is some roster limitations in Phoenix because Frank Vogel's a defensive-minded guy, and a lot of the players on the Phoenix Suns roster, when it comes to defense, they're capable, but it's not their specialty. Like, for example, I think Kevin Durant is one of the most underrated defensive players in NBA history. That's not his specialty. Kevin Durant is an all-time great scorer, not an all-time great defender. Same thing with Devin Booker. Devin Booker, maybe not quite an all-time great scorer yet, but one of the best scorers in the NBA. But he's not an all-time great defender. Bradley Beal is known for his scoring. He's not known for his defense, So that's the thing. There seems to be a disconnect where you have a defensive-minded head coach being asked to coach up very offensive-centric guys. So can it work? I do believe it can work because I've seen Phoenix at times look like one of the best teams in the NBA when they're healthy, and Kevin Durant is playing at an all-time great level, along with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal and the pieces around these star players, because I do think Phoenix has a very talented roster. But in terms of the head coach that is Frank Vogel, he's kind of dropped the ball at times where it seems like the team, for whatever reason, isn't quite always prepared and ready to play. The adjustments aren't necessarily being made. And we see in the playoffs versus the Timberwolves, they really sometimes struggle versus very physical style teams. A team like Minnesota, they'll punch them in the mouth. But how will Phoenix respond? Because in order to knock off a team like Boston, in order to knock off a team like Denver, they're going to need to be a lot more physical. They're going to need to defend at a much higher level. They can't be turning the basketball over as much. And a lot of that falls on the head coach that is Frank Vogel. I'm not trying to make Frank Vogel a scapegoat because he's far from that. Kevin Durant has to be better. Devin Booker especially has to be better. But when it comes to Frank Vogel, I don't know. It just seems like something might be missing. And I could be totally wrong because I'm not out on Frank Vogel. In fact, even if Phoenix has an early first round exit, I'm not necessarily saying you need to fire Frank Vogel because I don't think there is always a way to solve issues just by automatically firing the coach. Because who's going to replace Frank Vogel? You don't know if the next replacement is going to be better than Frank Vogel. It could be, but that's a huge risk. And with a guy like Kevin Durant, being 35 right now, going to turn 36 in the 2025 season, Kevin Durant only has a couple more great years left in him, in my opinion. I could be wrong because Kevin Durant, he's a basketball savant, one of the greatest players to ever live, one of the greatest scorers and bucket getters the world has ever seen. So Kevin Durant probably going to be Kevin Durant, even if he's a lesser version of himself. But the point is, Kevin Durant's not getting any younger. And in terms of the lineups that Frank Vogel throws out, sometimes I think he's setting up Phoenix to not do the best. Where, you have Drew Eubanks playing a bunch of minutes, and why are you not playing a guy like Vogel more minutes? Vogel needs to play big-time minutes if this team wants to go somewhere, and I just feel like sometimes Frank Vogel is mismanaging the bench. And in terms of the defensive philosophy and the offensive philosophy of the team, it just seems like from afar watching them, they're just a tad bit flawed and they're still trying to figure things out. But the thing is, we're kind of getting into the teeth and the meat of this Kevin Durant era in Phoenix, so this whole, I need to figure things out. I need to make adjustments. I need more time. Frank Vogel, you might be running out of time, okay, if you don't get things figured out. So look, I believe in Frank Vogel. I do believe the Phoenix Suns can win a championship with Frank Vogel being their head coach. But in order for that to happen, Frank Vogel needs to step it up as a defensive-minded head coach, and he needs to get through and register to these players because I think these players respect him, but I think Frank Vogel needs to focus on being much more of a vocal presence because guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, they're leaders, in my opinion, but they're leaders in their own way. They're not naturally super-duper vocal guys. So I think Frank Vogel needs to be a little bit better in that area, make better adjustments, get Phoenix buying in defensively, because if you get Phoenix to buy in defensively, their offense is going to come with the likes of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, leading your offense. So that's how I feel about Phoenix, and it's going to be interesting, if Frank Vogel can indeed win a championship in Phoenix, because it seems like the pieces are there, but only time will tell in the Kevin Durant era. Well, folks, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Jamon McKinney. Have a God bless day. Stay safe, and I'm Ghost.